The desert keeps its secrets well. Even in daylight, the sand folds over ruins like silk, hiding the shape of what once stood proud against the wind. At dusk, when the sun slips low and the air cools to silver, the dunes soften and the outlines appear again. The faint curve of a dome, the breath of stone that never forgot how to hum. They say this temple was not built for worship, but for listening. No idols were ever found here, no altars smeared with offerings or names of kings. Only silence, carved carefully into corridors that spiral inward like a memory trying to return. Beneath it lies a hollow chamber, vast, resonant, and alive. When the stars stand directly above its roof, the floor begins to tremble with a sound too deep for hearing. Not thunder, not wind, but a vibration older than both. A soft, endless hum rising through the bones of the earth. Historians have searched for the name of its builders, but no record has survived. Its markings run upward instead of outward, climbing the page like vines of light. Even in the silence, something flows. If you walk the bed at night, you can feel a faint coolness rising from the ground. Your footprints fill slowly behind you, as if the sand prefers its smoothness intact. When you pause and listen, you might hear a hum so low it feels more like pressure than sound. Some call it wind under the earth, but it matches the same tone heard in the mountain gate, the temple, the oracle circle, the breath of the world traveling through hidden channels. When the moon reaches its highest point, the stars above and the stones below align in perfect symmetry. For an instant, it feels as though the sky and earth are folded over one another, two sides of a single mirror. You look up and see the river of stars flowing across the night. You look down and see the faint shimmer of dust mirroring it exactly. They say it was made by a man who had already gone blind. The same bends, the same crossings, the same slow curve toward disappearance. The two rivers breathe together, one of light, one of silence. A legend recorded in an old Bedouin poem tells of a shepherd who followed the glowing sand to its end. He walked for 3 nights and 3 days, drinking only from the dew that formed at dawn. At the edge of the horizon, he found a pool so clear he could see stars beneath the surface. When he stepped closer, he realized they were not reflections, they were depths. He reached out a hand, and the water rose to meet him. He vanished without a sound. The next morning, his footprints led only halfway back. The rest had filled with light. His name appears once in an old Arabic manuscript from the 13th century. Yusuf al-Khalil, a scholar from the city of Ray, who vanished after claiming that the Earth's true geography was written not on land, but in the heavens. Today, the wind erases everything again. The dunes shift, covering and uncovering the river's ghost. But satellites still show its pattern, unchanged, glowing faintly under layers of sand. Geologists study its curves. Mystics trace its parallels in the sky. And somewhere between them, the truth waits. Neither water nor dream, but a memory of both. Perhaps the river never vanished. Perhaps it simply moved inward, flowing through the quiet spaces within us, surfacing only when we remember to be still enough to hear it. At dawn, when the stars fade and the horizon blushes, the sand cools. You kneel, scoop a handful, and watch it slip between your fingers. He was part of the great lineage of Islamic astronomers who charted the stars with precision unmatched for centuries. Yet his last work broke all laws of reason. The grains catch the first light, turning momentarily to silver before falling back to gray. In that small cascade you see it, the flow that never stopped, only slowed, only deepened. The river moving not through earth or sky, but through the pause between the two. You breathe, and the air tastes faintly of salt and starlight. The hum subsides into your pulse. And as you stand, the desert stretches endlessly around you, quiet and alive, as if waiting for the next traveler to listen long enough. For the river to begin again. Deep inside a mountain where the rock folds like dark cloth lies a chamber few have entered and none have fully understood. Its passage narrows with each turn until the light of the surface vanishes, replaced by a breath of cool air that smells of rain trapped for centuries. At the end waits a door, not carved but grown, its stone polished smooth by nothing visible, as if the mountain itself had sealed and unsealed it countless times. He called it the cartography of light. This is the tomb that dreamed of dawn. The carvings around the entrance are unlike any others in these lands. No images of kings or victories, no lists of offerings. Only rising suns, repeated again and again, their rays curling into spirals. Where most tombs celebrate endings, this one seems to speak of return. The archaeologists who first reached it in the 1920s expected to find a burial. They found instead a stillness so complete it felt like standing inside a held breath. The chamber is small, circular, its walls lined with a single ring of crystal tiles. Each tile bears a mark, lines crossing like constellations, faint and careful. At the center stands a stone sarcophagus that is neither open nor closed. A map that, according to his notes, traced the places where the sky had once touched the world. The lid hovers a finger's width above its base, unmoving, unsupported. No mechanism, no gap, just a seam of shadow between stone and stone. Inside, beneath that shadow, lies a figure perfectly preserved. Not mummified, not dried. Skin pale as ash, features soft, as though merely sleeping. Tests revealed no sign of decay, no chemical preservation, nothing to explain the body's peace. A few whispered it was illusion. Others called it divine intervention. But one of the team, an old Egyptian epigrapher named Hassan el-Miri, wrote a line in his field notes before the expedition was halted. It is not the dead that sleep here, but the morning. On the inner walls are inscriptions that read like lullabies. The language appears older than hieratic, closer to the early Proto-Sinaitic roots of all alphabet. The translations remain uncertain, but the phrases repeat in a rhythm that feels like breathing. The night bends its head. The heart waits for the first light. Rise not toward the sun, but through it. Above the sarcophagus, a narrow shaft leads upward, opening at the mountain's peak. At certain times of year, only 2 mornings, scholars believe, the first rays of dawn enter that passage and strike the hovering lid. For a moment, the whole chamber fills with gold light, and the seam of shadow disappears. When the map was rediscovered in the late 1800s, it was already brittle with age. Then, slowly, the hum of the mountain deepens, as if the stone itself were sighing. Villagers who live near the foothills tell older stories. They say the tomb belonged to a people who measured time not by calendars but by the sleep of stars. When the constellations returned to their original positions, they believed the world breathed again. They did not bury their dead. They placed them in mountains so they could rest in the body of the earth and rise when the sky aligned once more. This chamber, they say, was built for one who promised to wake. Not a ruler, not a saint, a listener. Someone who could hear the rhythm of daybreak in stone. They called her Asra, a name that means both dawn and waiting. Its surface shimmered faintly when held under starlight, the gold reflecting patterns invisible in daylight. Modern studies suggest the tomb was constructed around the same period as the valley temples of Egypt, though its architecture bears little resemblance. Some speculate that its builders came from across the sea, bringing techniques of levitation and magnetic alignment lost to us now. Others propose natural phenomena. Fine layers of quartz creating electromagnetic suspension between the stones, explaining the hovering lid. Whatever the cause, the effect remains. The air in that seam vibrates, not audibly, but enough to tremble the flame of a candle. Researchers left instruments overnight and recorded faint rhythmic oscillations exactly matching the human heartbeat at rest. The pattern ceased with sunrise. If you enter that chamber, you must move slowly. Every sound becomes magnified, footsteps, breathing, even the rustle of cloth. Under magnification, the lines revealed themselves to be calligraphy so fine it could only have been carved, not drawn. An inscription too small to read, like a prayer written for the eyes of the stars alone. The air feels thicker, saturated with invisible light. When your eyes adjust, The body in the sarcophagus appears less a body than an image formed of shadow and reflection. You feel both awe and unease. It is too perfect, too present. One explorer described a sensation like falling upward, as if the ceiling were the floor and the stars were buried within the rock. He left before dawn, unable to return. No one knows who sealed the tomb. There is no door in the usual sense, only a curve of stone that answers touch with warmth. When it closes, the hum grows stronger, wrapping around the listener like a lullaby. It is said that those who remain inside during sunrise hear something. Not a voice, but a sound like a distant tide rising through the stone. The nearest fragments of pottery date to around the 3rd century before our era, the age when Babylon was fading and Alexandria was rising. No one has ever fully translated it. They say it is the mountain dreaming of morning, reliving creation each time light returns. The last expedition to the site occurred 50 years ago. Their leader, Dr. Mireille Jacquet, was a geophysicist known for her study of acoustic resonance. She believed the chamber was designed as a frequency amplifier, that the geometry focused sound into the sarcophagus itself. Her final diary entry reads, "Perhaps this was never a tomb, but a memory of awakening. Perhaps they did not bury their dead, but kept a space for the world to remember how to rise." She died months later, her body found at her desk in Cairo, her hands stained faintly with red dust. The samples she brought back were missing. Since then, no one has reopened the mountain. Some say it charts the heavens as seen from before the flood. Others, that it marks the path of meteors that once fell upon sacred lands. The entrance remains, half hidden by rockfall and ivy. At certain angles of the sun, a faint glow seeps through the cracks, like breath escaping between sleeping lips. Local shepherds avoid the slope but admit to hearing sounds at dawn, a hum that rolls down the valley, low and gentle, neither bird nor wind. They call it the waking, and they do not speak while it lasts. To stand before that sealed door is to feel time folding in on itself. The air seems to tremble, and the dust at your feet lifts slightly, drawn toward the mountain's heart. You imagine the figure within, eyes closed, hands crossed lightly upon the chest, waiting not for resurrection but for rhythm, waiting for the sound of light touching stone. When the first color of morning seeps into the sky, the mountain glows faintly from within. Not a blaze, not a burst, but a few whisper that it was not a map of places at all. Just a slow blush, like the world remembering how to breathe. For a moment, it feels as though everything, the stone, the air, your own pulse, moves in one shared beat. Then the light fades, the hum subsides, the dust falls. Perhaps the dream was never meant to end. Perhaps the mountain itself is the sleeper, the tomb its heart, and dawn its pulse returning each day. A cycle of forgetting and remembering, a reminder that light is not born, only revealed. If you wait long enough, the mountain seems to sigh, a single exhale carrying the scent of stone, salt, and the faint sweetness of something growing in darkness. It was a map of time, and as you step away, the first sunlight reaches the valley below. You realize you are walking inside the dream that continues, the dream of every dawn that ever was, and the one still waiting to awaken. Far to the west, where cliffs fall straight into water the color of slate, the wind carries a sound that does not belong to wind at all. It begins softly, a murmur that seems to move with the tides, rising when the moon is full, fading when it hides. To the fishermen who live along this coast, the sound has a name older than their language, Nadim el-Bar, the friend of the sea. They say it comes from beneath the waves, from the drowned monastery whose bells still ring though its towers have been gone for 1,000 years. Long before the sea claimed it, the monastery stood on a low island joined to the mainland by a stone bridge. It was built by monks who followed a rhythm of devotion unlike any other order. Their prayers were sung in slow tones that matched the pull of the tides. At sunrise, they opened their doors to the east and sang the ocean awake. At sunset they faced the west and sang it back to sleep. Their bells marked not hours but the turning of the current. The chronicles that survive speak of their obsession with stillness. They believed that beneath the chaos of waves lay a perfect silence, and that by listening long enough, one could hear the pulse of creation hidden beneath sound itself. They called that silence the deep ear of God. In their chapel hung 7 bells, each tuned to the harmonic of a natural element: wind, fire, water, earth, light, shadow, and breath. They did not ring them by hand. They lowered them into the sea. The ritual was simple and strange. The candle flickers as though remembering him. At the lowest tide, when the bridge still held, the monks waded into the shallows carrying long ropes braided with salt grass. They fastened them to the bells, submerged them gently, and waited for the water to move. When the first wave touched metal, the ocean itself began to ring. Those who have heard underwater bells say the sound is unlike anything on land. It does not strike the ear but enters through the bones, soft and endless. Each tone bends and returns, traveling miles through the deep. The monks believed the sea carried their prayer outward, into places no voice could reach. Then the tide began to change. Records from coastal villages tell of winters when the sea rose higher each year. Storms came without warning, dragging stones from the monastery's walls, swallowing fields of barley and salt. You can almost see the cartographer sitting there, his blind eyes turned toward the sound of the flame. Still the monks remained. They said the water was not punishment but invitation. One spring, the bridge disappeared overnight. The island became a tower of rock surrounded by gray water. The monks lit lanterns at its edges, a circle of small flames floating against the tide. They rang the bells one final time. Witnesses on the mainland saw light pulse beneath the surface for hours. Then the lanterns went out. In the morning, nothing remained but sea. Centuries passed. He worked in silence, guided not by sight but by something older: intuition, rhythm, pulse. The monastery joined the catalogue of lost places. Like Lyonesse, like Atlantis, stories half remembered by sailors and storytellers. Yet on certain nights, when the wind turns warm and the sky clears, the bells return. They are never loud, just a deep vibration that moves through the hulls of anchored boats and the sand beneath sleeping villages. Dogs lift their heads and listen. Children wake without knowing why. Divers who have searched the area say they have seen shapes of arches far below, covered in coral and moon-colored moss. When they touched the stone, a faint tremor passed through their gloves, steady as a heartbeat. They surfaced too quickly, shaking, unable to explain the pressure that followed them for days. Marine instruments record nothing unusual: no frequencies, no tremors, no shifts in current. Each line drawn upon the gold leaf was measured not in distance, but in breath. Yet the sound persists, as though the ocean keeps its own memory beyond the reach of measure. Local fishermen treat the phenomenon with respect. They never cast nets near the bay when the bells are heard. Instead, they lower small offerings into the water: a shell, a strip of cloth, a handful of grain. They call it feeding the silence. They believe that the bells toll for those who drowned at sea, guiding their spirits home through the tide. Old men say the ringing is strongest when a storm is near. Others swear it comes before calm, when the air is heavy and expectant. Either way, no one mistakes it for anything else. He believed the world was not flat or round, but woven, that the stars were knots in a fabric that linked all things. A team of oceanographers once tried to locate the exact source. They dropped sensors along the coast, mapping the seafloor with sonar. One night, as the devices recorded, the sound began, a single tone rising through the dark water. The reading spiked, then vanished. Every instrument shut down at once. When they retrieved them days later, the data drives were blank, wiped clean as new. The only trace left was a faint vibration in the metal casings, as if the machines had swallowed a note too deep to release. At dawn, when the tide recedes, the sea leaves patterns on the sand that look like writing. Lines that curve and cross like scores of music. Some swear they can read them, small messages from the deep. Yet the stonework belongs to no known style. When he lost his vision, he said it was a gift. One word appears more often than others: return. There is an old legend told in the villages during the winter solstice. It says that once every 1,000 years, when the moon and the tides align, the sea falls away for a single night. The monastery rises again, its bells gleaming with salt. For that brief hour, the monks walk the shore, their robes woven of foam and seaweed. They ring the bells once more to remind the world of stillness. Those who claim to have seen it describe the light of the bells as pale green, the color of dawn through fog. Their sound is said to blur the line between dreaming and waking. Fishermen who hear it in sleep wake with tears on their cheeks. The eyes, he wrote, see only what is near. They say it feels like the ocean forgiving itself. Stand on that cliff now and close your eyes. The air is wet, tasting of iron and salt. Below, the waves move like lungs, inhaling, exhaling, never ceasing. The wind grows soft for a moment, and in that brief hush, the first note appears, low, round, endless. Then another joins it, then another, until the sea is a choir made of distance. You do not hear it. You feel it. The bones in your wrists, your ribs, your skull all begin to vibrate. It is not music, but darkness lets one feel the architecture of the unseen. It is memory, the same sound that filled the hollow chambers of temples and mountains long ago. The hum of the world remembering itself. The bells fade slowly. The tide turns again. Only the wind remains. Perhaps the monks were right, that beneath the noise of existence lies a silence so complete it becomes sound again. Perhaps they did not drown. Perhaps they sank willingly, to keep that tone alive where no storm could reach. And maybe that is why, on nights when the sea is still and the stars are low, you can hear the faint ringing return. He began to hear patterns in the night wind. Not warning, not lament. Just a slow pulse of remembrance rising through salt and shadow. A bell tolling in water. A prayer that never ends. A whisper reminding the living to listen. The path climbs through dust and ruin. A vein of pale stone winding up toward the horizon where the mountains end and the sky begins. All day the air feels thin, holding its breath, waiting for night. At the summit the wind stops, and in that sudden quiet stands the temple. Its walls are broken but not defeated. The arches still catch light, and their shadows curve like folded wings across the floor. The rustle of papyrus became the whisper of constellations. Inside, everything leans toward the center, as if even the ruin still remembers how to listen. This is where the stories end, and perhaps where they began. The temple that spoke to the stars. The stones are older than the mountain they rest on. Their surface carries small flecks of silver that glow when the first twilight appears. Scholars who have examined them say the mineral is galena mixed with quartz, the same materials used in early radios to catch the trembling of distant voices. But those who built this place needed no such names. They shaped resonance out of silence, tuning matter to the night. At the center of the open court stands a circle of mirrors, polished slabs of black obsidian set into the ground, their edges so perfect they reflect the sky without distortion. Every sound a coordinate. When the sun sets and the stars arrive, the mirrors catch their light and throw it upward again, as if answering a question posed long ago. Travelers who camp here speak of patterns shifting across the floor, constellations bending, joining, dissolving. It is as though the temple is correcting the sky, reminding it of its older design. Ancient texts from the surrounding valleys speak of a priesthood that heard the heavens rather than observed them. They kept no written scripture. Their teachings were sound. They believed every star emitted a tone, and that when the world was young, those tones formed the harmony of life itself. To them, creation was music slowed into matter. The temple, then, was their instrument. Archaeoastronomers who have mapped its surviving foundations found that each mirror aligns not only with a known constellation but also with the frequency of a natural resonance within the Earth's crust. Every silence, a point on the map. The pattern is too deliberate to be chance. When the wind moves across the open court, the air hums in intervals that match the same cosmic ratios Pythagoras would later call the music of the spheres. Here, stone and starlight perform their duet. Walk deeper, and you will find inscriptions barely visible, cut into the pillars with tools sharper than any iron of their time. They are not words but thin grooves forming spirals. When traced by the fingers, they vibrate. Some who have done so report hearing faint tones within their skulls, a sound that seems to come from behind the eyes. Neuroscientists who visited in the 1970s brought sensitive equipment and recorded subsonic frequencies pulsing from the stone itself. The readings matched the electrical activity of a resting human brain. Perhaps that is why the priests called themselves listeners of light. Perhaps the temple was not meant to send messages to the heavens but to translate the ones already arriving. Imagine the night centuries ago, before ruin and wind. A circle of priests standing barefoot on the cold floor, their hands raised not in prayer but in equilibrium. Above them, the constellations breathe. Below them, the mirrors answer. The temple hums low, patient, immense, each note folding into the next, a spiral of sound that travels upward until it becomes light. For those few hours, earth and sky are one. Then dawn comes, and the voices fade. They always fade. A story survives from that same century, told by travelers moving along the Silk Road, of a scholar who carried a brass compass that pointed not north, but upward. The priests believed that the stars sleep when the world grows too loud. They built this place to remind them how to wake gently. When the first explorers rediscovered the site, they camped among its stones and listened through the night. One of them, a linguist named Clara Noon, wrote that she felt a whisper just beyond hearing, like breath moving through glass. At midnight, she described a brief pulse of light sweeping across the mirrors in rhythm with her own heartbeat. When she placed her hand against the floor, she said it was warm. In her final report, before illness forced her to leave, she wrote, "I no longer believe the stars are above us. We are within them. This temple only made the truth visible." Modern astronomers who have measured the geometry agree that the structure aligns with the galactic plane rather than the local horizon. It faces not sunrise or sunset but the dark river of the Milky Way. When he set it upon the ground, its needle quivered toward the zenith, following invisible currents in the air. A temple built not for gods of weather or harvest, but for the invisible center of the cosmos, the place from which gravity itself flows. The idea is older than civilization. Every myth begins with a spark falling from heaven into darkness. Every soul, they said, carries that same echo, a fragment of the original chord. As night deepens, the mirrors catch more stars until it seems you are standing in the sky itself. The air grows cool. The silence thickens. Then, very softly, the ground begins to hum. The sound is barely there, a vibration rather than a tone, but it gathers. It rises through the soles of your feet, travels up the spine, reaches the chest. Some of the blocks are fused, not cut. Their seams melted as if by heat no tool could produce. He claimed these were currents of remembrance, lines of celestial gravity connecting stars to sacred sites. It does not disturb. It aligns. Above, the stars seem to draw closer. Their reflections in the mirrors tremble and merge, creating rivers of light that flow toward the altar at the center. The air shimmers, thin as breath. For a moment, the hum takes shape. Not language, not music, but something that moves between them. A conversation carried across millennia. And though no words form, you understand. The temple is not speaking to the stars. Most dismissed him as mad. It is speaking with them. When the first light of dawn touches the horizon, the sound ceases. The stars fade. The mirrors grow dull. Only the echo remains, faint, circular, endless. The priests are gone. The instruments broken. But the resonance lingers in the stones, waiting for the night to return. You step outside into the gray of morning. The wind stirs again, gentle, unhurried. But centuries later, explorers noticed something strange. Behind you, the temple stands silent, its mirrors veiled with dust. For a heartbeat you think you see light still moving across their surface. A last whisper of dialogue between heaven and earth. Passes quickly. The world resumes its ordinary noise. Birds cry, sand shifts, the sky brightens. But deep within you the hum continues, soft and steady. The same vibration that began in the chamber beneath the stone, that moved through the gate, the oracle, the archivist, the drowned bells, the dreaming tomb. One breath carried through every silence of time. You walk down the path and feel the morning open like a slow chord resolving. Perhaps nothing was ever lost. Many ancient monuments, from Angkor Wat to the pyramids of Giza, align not only with the stars above them, but with each other, forming invisible chains across continents. Perhaps every whisper was part of the same conversation, the universe remembering its own language of light. And as the last stars fade, a single thought remains, quiet as prayer. Some temples never fall silent. They wait, they listen, and when the world grows still enough, they speak again. The journey ends where it began, not in discovery, but in listening. The night has folded itself once more around the world. The air is soft, the stars dimmer now, like embers learning how to rest. Could Yusuf have known? Every story, every chamber, every echo has led here, to this moment of stillness where sound and silence share the same breath. The temple above the clouds, the river beneath the sky, the bells asleep in the sea, all are parts of the same body. The earth hums in slow rhythms beneath our feet, and the sky hums back. Between them we live, brief sparks carried on a current of ancient sound. It is said that if one were to map all these tones, the hum of stone, the sigh of sand, the whisper of water through buried gates, they would form a single melody. A song the world has been singing since before memory learned its name. We forget it in daylight. We remember it in dreams. So let the world dim a little. Let the body settle into its weight. The golden map, when studied under ultraviolet light, reveals those same alignments. Let the mind loosen its grasp on the hours. There is nothing left to search for now. No temple to find, no mystery to solve. Only the slow exhale of time, the faint vibration that moves through all things, through stone and sea, through star and skin. You breathe in and the ancient rhythm answers. You breathe out and the silence replies. The stars above you are not distant. They are reflections within the breath you hold. Perhaps this was the meaning all along, that listening is not something we do but something we return to, that the universe has always been speaking softly, and we are only now remembering how to hear. Each curve ends in a spiral that matches the latitude of a sacred site, as if the map's purpose was not navigation, but resonance. The candle burns lower. The last note of the hum fades into darkness. And in that darkness, vast, patient, eternal, a whisper remains. Not words, but presence. A quiet that remembers. Sleep now within it. The story will continue on its own. The earth will keep breathing. The stars will keep listening. And somewhere beneath the stone, the hum begins again. The library around him must have smelled of dust and candle wax, the air thick with the memory of hands turning parchment. An archaeologist named Dr. Mendel once wrote that the walls behaved like a single organism. He wrote until dawn, copying fragments of older texts, Sumerian hymns, Greek cosmologies, the lost treatises of Alexandria. All spoke of the same longing, to link heaven and earth, light and form, silence and sound. One note in his surviving commentary reads, "The stars are not distant fires, but mirrors of our forgetting. To map them is to recall what we once were." You imagine him on his final night, the candle burning low, his fingers tracing lines he could no longer see. Outside, the desert wind murmured through the broken lattice, carrying the scent of salt from a sea long gone. He dipped his stylus one last time into ink made of crushed lapis and honey, an alchemical mixture once used in sacred manuscripts, and drew a final circle at the top of the map. Not a destination. When he spoke aloud within them, his voice returned differently each time, reshaped by the structure itself, as if the building were choosing what to keep and what to echo back. A door. Then he blew out the candle, and in the darkness something answered. When explorers found his library, centuries later, they described the map's glow as lunar. It seemed to emit light, though there was none. Scientists blamed a thin layer of reflective gold dust. Yet one researcher noted that the glow intensified on nights when the constellation Lyra rose directly overhead. Lyra, the celestial harp, the same constellation that ancient myth says sang the world into being. Coincidence, perhaps? Those who have descended into the lower chamber describe the sensation of being inside a living throat. But in every culture, music and maps shared a secret kinship. Both were forms of remembering. Both traced the invisible. If you sit now before the map, as the candle burns beside it, you'll notice how the flame seems to lean toward certain lines, as if drawn by them. When the air grows still, the wax hardens into tiny translucent waves, mirroring the patterns of the engraving. The light shivers gently over its surface, and for a moment, it seems the map itself is breathing. Not flat gold, but molten alive. Each ripple becomes a horizon. Every sound bends. Each shimmer, a star. You realize you are no longer looking at a map of space, but a reflection of time itself, flowing upward, folding back, spiraling into the quiet geometry of the universe. Some nights, historians say, when the moon is thin and the wind still, the library hums softly, the same low tone once heard in the stone temple miles away. Perhaps coincidence again. Or perhaps, as some have dared to suggest, these ancient structures are speaking to each other across centuries. One through stone, one through gold. Both built to listen. There are no more candles now, only replicas of light. Yet the original flame that once danced beside Yusuf's golden map seems to have left a trace. In every photograph of the artifact, a faint reflection appears near the edge, a soft halo of warmth where no light source exists. Every breath carries weight. Experts call it a flaw in the camera lens. But under close inspection, the reflection moves slightly, like the flicker of a living flame. Some knowledge is not meant to be understood. It is meant to be kept in motion, passed like breath, like song. Perhaps that is why the map's text resists translation. Each attempt fades with time, the letters dulling, as though protecting themselves from certainty. Those who've seen it in person describe a strange calmness afterward. Not revelation, but release. A sense that the world is larger than language and more fragile than form. The acoustics are perfect, tuned to a pitch that seems to belong not to the human world but to the slow rhythm of the planet itself. Outside, the wind begins to rise again. The candle gutters. The map gleams faintly one last time before the flame dies, plunging the room into darkness. For a moment, the golden lines seem to hold their own light. Then they fade slow, patient, eternal. What remains is the scent of wax and dust. and the quiet echo of something vast, still listening. Perhaps the cartographer never mapped the heavens at all. Perhaps he mapped the silence between them. In modern terms, the hum matches the natural frequency of seismic vibration, a resonance of around 8 Hz. And perhaps, even now, that silence continues to drift. Through stone, through sand, through the pulse of the earth. A voice without words, a candle that never fully goes out. The gate is small and worn. Its hinges breathe rather than move. A palm of wood against a palm of stone, and night opens like a folded page. Inside the wall the air changes. Cooler, fragrant, a little damp, as if the day has been saved in bowls of shade. Jasmine hangs low over a narrow path, and the first breath carries a sweetness that feels older than language. But long before any instrument measured it, the ancients must have known. Some say this was the heart of the temple. Not the altar, not the dome, this garden. A square of silence held within higher silence, planted to keep time from running away. The monks who lived here walked in circles at dusk, each step a bead on an invisible rosary. They watered by moonlight, harvested by starlight, and spoke in the quiet grammar of leaves. There are marks still in the soil, low ridges that guide water like a script. Channels shaped by hands that understood desert thirst. Ancient builders across these lands carved such veins and called them lifelines. The Persians named their underground rivers Kanat. The Nabateans hid clay pipes beneath dust, so the sun would not drink. In gardens like this, water was a prayer you could touch. At the center lies a pool. They listened with their whole bodies. Shallow, perfectly still, lined with stone that glows faintly when the moon rises. The surface reflects not the sky above, but something softer, a parallel light that seems to arrive from beneath. The monks believed the pool was a mirror of memory. They would stand at its edge, breathe once, and watch the past arrange itself like drifting petals. On the northern wall, a vine untangles itself with patient grace. Its leaves are small and shaped like teardrops. When the wind sighs, the whole wall shivers and you can hear the soft sound of pages turning. It is said that each leaf holds a fragment of a name, and in summer the names perfume the air. The paths are not straight. They curl like smoke and rejoin themselves like thought. It is said that the priests who once guarded this place would stand barefoot upon the floor during certain nights of the year. A garden, in the old understanding, was not a place to cross. It was a place to be changed. Across empires and tongues, the same idea returned. In Persia, the Chahar Bagh, 4 gardens, divided water into a cross of rivers, a symbol of the soul's rest. In medieval cloisters, squares of herbs held green medicine and quiet labor. Mint for the breath, sage for the throat, hyssop for the conscience. In Andalusian courts, channels cut from alabaster made the smallest trickle sound like a river. Here, the echoes of those worlds seemed gathered and steeped, as if the garden had brewed itself from distant memories. There is a fig tree leaning inward, its trunk twisted, its roots folded like old fingers. Figs traveled with pilgrims, tucked into cloth, offered to travelers as sweetness and strength. Priests of many faiths kept them close, not for sacrifice, but for shade and story. The first fruit in many tellings, the last comfort in many others. They believed the stars above sent a pulse into the earth, and the temple gathered it, shaped it, sent it back. Perhaps this tree remembers all of them and asks nothing but breath. A scent moves through the leaves that only appears after sunset. Night-blooming flowers open their mouths when the light thins. Jasmine, datura, white lilies that look like long throats of prayer. Their perfume gathers low near the ground, a mist of sweetness you walk through as if waiting. In some monasteries, the bell for Compline, the final prayer, was rung after the opening of these flowers, so the words could rise through a tender air. On a slab of stone near the pool, faint lines remain. Not letters exactly, more like the outline of a hand traced and retraced until it became a door. A story is told of a scribe who copied ancient hymns here by moonlight. He would rest his palm on the stone between verses, drawing the night in through his skin before he wrote again. To them, prayer was not speech, it was listening. His pages smell, even now, of crushed basil and damp clay. The garden's walls hold the world at a kind distance. Beyond them, the desert exhales heat, sand hisses, stars burn with clean flame. Within, the temperature settles to something like memory. Gardens have always been a way of shaping time. In the hanging gardens, whether they lived or only dreamed, it was said that water climbed as if remembering how to fall. In the courtyards of Isfahan, fountains counted the day in droplets. In Japan's moss gardens, centuries are kept not with numbers but with shade. Here, time seems to fold, then loosen like cloth resting after labor. You move along the curved path and come to a bed of herbs. Each alignment of the heavens became a note in a music too vast to be written down. Time wound into soft mats. Rue with its bitter breath. Lavender, whose gray leaves carry a rumor of rain. The monks tended these not for trade or remedy alone, but for the sound they made when brushed. Soft syllables of plant against palm, a language of minor music. Herb gardens in many monasteries were arranged by the body. Leaves for the lungs here, stems for the stomach there, as if the garden were a small map of a human being laid gently upon the earth. A small bell hangs under an arch of vine. When the wind moves, it rings with a tone like a breath drawn slowly through teeth. No one knows if the bell called the monks to silence or released them from it. Some believe it marked the moment when listening became prayer. They marked it in carvings instead. Spirals that mirror galaxies, waves that mimic breath, constellations arranged not for navigation but remembrance. There is an old belief, not doctrine, not law, just a belief that clung like lichen, that souls passing through the world choose a plant to rest in for one night before they move on. A rose holds love and release. An olive holds endurance. A reed holds grief without breaking. The monks did not preach this. They watered around it. They left small bowls of clean water on flat stones, not for birds alone, but for the thirst of the unseen. By the eastern wall, a doorway without a door stands open to a view of nothing. Beyond it, a short corridor, then a brick wall. The gesture itself is the point. When you walk through those corridors today, the air still feels heavy with that intention. In many sacred buildings there is a gate that leads nowhere, a reminder that not all passage is movement. Some thresholds only teach the foot to pause. At the pool, the surface is flawless. When you lean over it, the moon appears deeper than the sky, as if the water is a gate through which the light is returning. Scholars who visited long ago wrote of twin moons and argued about angles and polished stone. Angles explain much, but standing here, one feels that explanation is a kind of thirst the garden cannot share. The monks had a phrase for the pool, the remembering glass. They said it showed the first light one ever saw and the last light one would carry. A frog lifts its head and sets it down again. Dust catches the candlelight like drifting ash, and the patterns on the walls shimmer faintly. The tiniest wave runs outward like a whispered yes and then is gone. Even the insects have a slower sound here. Moths with dust-soft wings tap the jasmine and rest. A beetle pushes a bead of water across a leaf as if arranging a jewel for a patient queen. In one corner, a narrow bench is built into the wall. Its stone is smoothed by the weight of many evenings. There is a hollow in the corner where oil lamps once waited. Clay lamps, simple and ordinary, like round hands cupping fire. Night after night, the same routine would unfold. Trim the wick. Pour a line of oil. Some call them maps. Others call them messages. Protect the small flame with a palm against the draft. The light of such lamps trembles in a way that teaches the eyes to soften. When sight softens, hearing opens. When hearing opens, time loosens its fist. A parchment derived from this place mentions a practice called counting the leaves. Not arithmetic, not tally. A monk would choose a branch and spend an hour naming each leaf down to the tip. By the end, there would be no names left, only attention. Where attention rests, the heart lowers its voice, he wrote. The garden speaks then, and we only answer with breath. But when the light moves, the lines seem to curve and fade, as though reminding us that meaning changes with the hour. Someone has scratched a small star into the stone by the bench. not careful, not meant for scholarship. A moment of human hand meeting mineral and leaving a bright, brief sign. It is comforting to think that even here, in the discipline of quiet, someone needed to say, I was present with the stars and the stone in the same hour. The factual world and the world of reverence meet easily in gardens. The Roman writer Pliny praised shaded courts where fountains cooled the noon. The Quranic image of paradise is a garden beneath which rivers flow, always watered, always at rest. Medieval manuscripts picture walled enclosures called hortus conclusus, the enclosed garden, where the sacred entered as a scent before it arrived as a thought. Across the centuries, people built small Edens in harsh lands, not to escape the world, but to remember how to be in it gently. At the far end of the hall lies a stone tablet inscribed in an unknown script. Here, the memory is not an argument. It is a fragrance. Basil, bruised slightly by a passing robe. Rosemary warmed by a lamp and exhaling pine and sea in one narrow breath. Mint lifting at the disturbance of an ankle, then settling again as if sleep had returned to it. Closer to the pool, an inscription runs low along the stones. It is almost erased, a river of pale scratches where a sentence once stood. Only 3 words can still be read. Breath, return, listen. Only 1 word repeats again and again, framed by a symbol shaped like an open mouth. The moon climbs higher and the garden grows brighter while the sky remains dark. Every leaf makes a small mirror. Every droplet holds a star. It is easy to imagine that if you waited long enough, dawn would arrive here first and then go out to wake the rest of the world. A story is told of a pilgrim who came with grief so heavy she could not kneel. She sat on the bench and watched the pool until the moon leaned across it like an old friend. In the faint light she could see, not the face she missed, but the shape the missing had made in her life. She left a small sprig of time and carried none of it away. Some voices, she is said to have whispered, only echo when we are ready to listen. Beyond the wall, the wind softly sweeps the sand into new letters no one will read. Some scholars think it means breath. Within the wall, nothing hurries. The bell stirs once and quiets. A moth brushes your sleeve like a blessing given by accident. When you rise, the path seems different though you have not moved far. That is the old teaching. One does not cross a garden. One is crossed by it. You pass under the vine and through the small gate that still breathes instead of moves. Behind you the scents braid themselves into night, and the pool returns to its perfect stillness. Perhaps it was never meant to be found by the busy hour. Perhaps it was planted to hold what the world continually forgets, that time can be folded, that memory can be fragrant, that silence can be full. Others, voice. Somewhere beyond the wall a jackal calls once. A thin thread of sound that quickly dissolves. The stars lean patient as gardeners. And under their careful gaze the garden keeps remembering. Leaf by leaf, breath by breath, a soft, star-marked chamber of earth, where nothing is lost, only steeped, then given back as scent and shade and the faintest ring of water in the dark. The cliffs rise like broken prayers above the sea. White limestone, sheer and wind-carved, their edges trembling under the slow breath of waves. A few, less certain, suggest it means simply beginning. On one of those cliffs, where gulls circle and sleep in crevices of salt, a stone observatory still stands, a ring of arches open to the wind, its roof long fallen, its floors layered with dust and feathers. They say an astronomer built it there, on the line where the world ends and the stars begin. He wanted nothing between himself and the sky. The stones of the observatory are older than the man who claimed them. Some are cut with marks that predate history, spirals and eyes, the same shapes found in temples of sound across deserts far away. He gathered them from ruins and built upward, creating a place that could hear light. Every evening he would climb the narrow stair carved into the cliff face, carrying a small oil lamp that swayed like a second moon in the wind. He was a scholar of the last great libraries, Alexandria's descendants, Baghdad's brothers, and he came from a time when numbers were still prayers, when to measure the heavens was to speak with them. He brought with him his instruments, a brass astrolabe, a water clock, a compass of polished obsidian, and a notebook bound in leather worn thin by salt. 4 years he watched the constellations wheel above the dark sea. Dr. Mendel wrote of a night when his team slept near the central dais. He drew their movements with meticulous devotion, marking not only what changed but what trembled, the pulse between appearances. He believed the stars breathed with the earth, that the universe was not still but tidal. The rising of light mirrored the falling of water. At first his notes were full of precision. Coordinates, measurements, calculations of angle and refraction. But as the years passed, his writing grew stranger. The numbers replaced by sketches of waves and feathers, lines of poetry breaking through formulae. "Light is patient dust," he wrote one winter. "Each star is a heartbeat we have not yet heard." He began to speak less of planets and more of silence. The sky was clear, and Orion hung directly above the roof's circular opening. He noted that his instruments grew untrustworthy, that the stars no longer matched their expected paths. He marked the discrepancy, first small, then greater, until his maps no longer aligned with any chart known to scholars. He believed the heavens were shifting. Modern astronomers call such drift precession, the slow wobble of the Earth's axis. But in his solitude, he thought the sky itself was moving away. He built his final instrument with hands trembling from years of wind and ink. It was a ring of polished stone, aligned with the horizon, designed to catch the reflection of dawn on the sea and measure the color of its first light. He called it the Gate of Renewal. Each morning, when the sun rose, he watched the pale fire enter the ring and spill across the floor like a slow tide. Around midnight, the vibration began. Faint, steady, continuous. The reflection would climb the opposite wall, pause, then fade. He kept record after record, noting how the light changed with the seasons. At first it was gold, then white, then something he could only describe as the color of breath. The villagers below thought him mad. They would see his small figure standing in the cold dawn, eyes fixed not on the sun but on its echo. Yet when ships passed near the cliffs, sailors spoke of hearing faint music, as if the stone itself sang with the rising light. Perhaps the same hum that lived in the temple's chamber, the same tone that had wandered through centuries, found him here too. Perhaps he had tuned himself to it without knowing. When storms came, he refused to leave. The instruments registered movement deep below the surface, but there was no earthquake, no shifting of plates. He wrote that lightning was the language of forgotten gods. He filled pages with the patterns of its strikes, calling them letters of fire. Sometimes, in his loneliness, he spoke aloud to the sky, asking questions no one could answer. Where does memory go when stars die? What becomes of light when no one watches it fall? He was not the first to ask. The Chaldeans had believed that each star carried the soul of a city. The Greeks thought starlight was divine exhalation, the breath of the cosmos. The Persians saw the heavens as a wheel of time turning endlessly. Perhaps he heard echoes of all of them and tried to listen for what came after. The sand outside was still. His last recorded entry is dated the year when a great meteor storm crossed the sky. He wrote of lying on the cold stone floor, watching the rain of fire. The stars fell like tears, dissolving before they touched the sea. He marked their paths with trembling lines and wrote beneath them a single sentence. The gods are leaving their signatures upon the wind. After that, the notebook ends. When travelers found the observatory decades later, it was half collapsed. Inside, they found the remains of his instruments: rusted brass circles, cracked lenses, fragments of glass that had melted into shapes like frozen waves. Inside, the hum seemed to come from the stone itself, as though the structure were exhaling after centuries of waiting. They also found his notebook, its last pages stained with salt. It smelled faintly of oil and seaweed. Scholars argued about his conclusions. Some dismissed them as madness. Others said his observations anticipated what we now know as axial shift. But the villagers told another story. They said that on the night he died, the sea went silent. No waves, no wind, only the echo of stone breathing. And when morning came, the horizon glowed faintly blue, as though dawn had arrived from below the water. He described it as the sound of the world remembering itself. You can still visit the place if you know where to look. There is no path, only a faint track of flattened grass leading up from the shore. At the top, the air is thinner, salted, clean. The arches frame the sky like fragments of a great instrument. If you sit where he once stood and close your eyes, you can feel the pulse beneath the rock, a soft vibration that hums through your ribs. It is the same note that lives in deep caves, in temples of resonance, in the quiet chambers of your own breath. His instruments lie scattered. The astrolabe catches the light and spills it in small circles. The brass has gone green with age, but the markings still gleam, delicate numbers, tiny stars. If you trace them with your finger, you will find that they no longer form equations but constellations. There are legends that the temple was once part of a network, a chain of resonant sanctuaries built along the 30th parallel. He had turned his mathematics into a prayer. Some nights, fishermen swear they see a faint glow on the cliffs, like a lantern burning where no one walks. They say the old astronomer still watches the sky, his lamp moving with the rhythm of the tide. When lightning strikes the sea, the reflection flashes across the ruins. A silver pulse, a heartbeat, a single note. And perhaps that is all his work ever was. A song written in stone for the moment when heaven and earth breathe in time again. At dawn, the sea remains vast and quiet. The gulls rise and cry, their voices thin against the wind. From the cliff's edge, you can see the curvature of the world. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the Temple of Edfu, and the lost ziggurats of Mesopotamia all share this line. The same line he must have watched every morning, the boundary between darkness and light, loss and understanding. His observatory stands half in ruin, half in memory. But the sound remains. When the sun lifts above the water, the wind carries a tone. Faint, circular, familiar. It rolls through the broken arches, across the stones still warm with centuries of watching. And for a moment you understand what he must have felt. That the universe is not a map to be solved, but a rhythm to be remembered. That light, like breath, returns in its own time. And that even when the stars shift and fade, they leave behind an echo strong enough to find again. Ancient builders may have known how to use geometry not only to honor the heavens but to tune the earth. You linger there until the sun climbs higher and the tone dissolves into the cry of birds. The sea resumes its motion, the wind its whisper. All that remains is the faint shimmer of light across the stone, the last note of a song the world once knew how to hear. Perhaps he was right after all. Perhaps the stars did move. Or perhaps it was the heart of the watcher that shifted, drawing the sky a little closer each night. Either way, the observatory still listens. The air still vibrates with a memory too patient to die. And somewhere, in that hush between waves, the astronomer's lament continues. A low, endless hum at the edge of the world. The temple we now stand in could have been their final experiment, a place where cosmic and terrestrial harmonies met, where silence looks back and calls itself light. The mountain keeps its mouth closed most of the year. Only in certain hours, when the sun and wind lean at the same angle, does the gate reveal itself. A seam of shadow within the rock, so narrow that a hand could hide it completely. Locals call it the breathing stone. They say that if you press your ear to its surface at dusk, you can hear the world inhaling. The entrance is smooth, without inscription. No hinges, no lintel, no sign of human hand. Yet deep inside the stone there is space, hollow and resonant, carved with impossible precision. Those who have walked the narrow tunnel say the air changes halfway through, becomes warmer, lighter, threaded with sound. A receiver, not a transmitter. A sound not made by wind, not by echo. Something slower, deeper. A low vibration that moves through the ribs and settles beneath the skin. Geologists who came here in the early 20th century tried to name it. They brought instruments, microphones, seismic readers. They said the tone came from underground caverns, wind funnels, pressure pockets. But one of them, a woman named Dr. Mira Kane, disagreed. She noticed the vibration pulsed at the same frequency as the human breath at rest. 6 cycles per minute. She wrote that the mountain does not sing, it breathes. A space where one could hear the breath of the stars. Her colleagues dismissed her as romantic. Yet when her reports were rediscovered decades later, her readings matched the global Schumann resonance, the faint heartbeat of the planet's atmosphere itself. The tunnel opens into a wide chamber whose ceiling curves like the inside of a lung. The floor is covered in fine dust that seems to glow faintly under lamplight. The walls shimmer with veins of quartz, each catching the glow and carrying it in thin lines. No carvings, no idols, only small hollows spaced evenly, as if meant for hands to rest. When the wind outside rises, air flows through the passage and fills the chamber with a low, circular hum. It rises gently, fades, then returns. In that rhythm, the dust lifts in small spirals. Inside the main chamber, the light fades quickly. It looks like smoke but moves with purpose, curling toward the ceiling and dissolving in the dim light. Those who have stood there say it feels as though the mountain is breathing through them, in, out, an ancient pulse older than speech. Some call it coincidence, others design. Legends reach back further. The oldest stories come from the mountain tribes, tales of a gate that leads to the first breath, the place where the earth was quickened. Their word for it is Anasha, meaning both air and soul. They tell of stonecutters who were taught by the wind, who learned to carve by listening rather than striking. They believed the rock held memory, that each cut, if made in harmony, released the trapped breath of creation. You strike a match and the flame blooms small and golden. Every chamber, every curve was a note in a larger song. A temple not to gods, but to respiration itself. Centuries later, early mystics traveling from the east recorded similar wonders. Mountains that hummed when the wind turned, caves where the air pulsed in time with the stars. Some claimed these were natural phenomena. Others called them instruments of the divine. The gate of breath and dust stands where 3 trade routes once met. Perhaps pilgrims carved it as a resting place. Perhaps scholars built it to measure vibration. Or perhaps it was simply found, not made, an organ of the earth mistaken for a monument. The walls glint with flecks of mica, tiny constellations embedded in stone. At the center of the chamber, a single stone stands upright. Tall, slender, smooth as bone. If you lean close, a faint warmth radiates from it. Under moonlight, it glows from within, not bright, but steady, like the ember of a dying fire. Touch it, and the hum deepens. Some visitors claim they can feel their own heartbeat slow until it matches the rhythm of the stone. Archaeologists found traces of soot near its base, remnants of lamps long extinguished. Someone once came here to listen in darkness. When the wind passes through the gate, the chamber's tone changes. It becomes layered, one sound rising, another falling. Each surface seems to drink the glow rather than reflect it. Those who have studied it with modern sensors call it a harmonic series, similar to overtone singing practiced by monks in remote mountain temples. The frequencies align with musical intervals that soothe the human nervous system. Coincidence again, perhaps? Or maybe the ancients understood what modern medicine now confirms, that vibration can heal. Imagine the scene 1,000 years ago. Pilgrims climbing at dusk, torches flickering, the last light painting the peaks in copper. They would enter barefoot, leaving their sandals by the gate. Inside, they would sit on the stone floor in concentric circles. No chanting, no prayer, only breathing. When you whisper, your own voice folds inward, returning slower, softer, as if aged by centuries before reaching you again. Dozens of bodies inhaling and exhaling in time, their rhythm feeding the mountain's hum until human and stone merged. In such silence, the body forgets where it ends. The breath moves freely, shared, ancient. When they rose to leave, the floor would be covered with the faint imprint of hands and knees, small offerings of dust to the breathing earth. Modern explorers still come. They bring recorders, cameras, sensors. The hum never fails. But what they cannot capture is its texture, the way it settles into thought. Some travelers claim that if you listen closely, the hum carries a rhythm, a heartbeat that matches your own. Inside the gate, ideas quiet themselves. The mind unravels, not in fear, but in recognition. Something in the body remembers that it too was shaped by breath and dust. Dr. Kane's final journal entry, written before she disappeared on her second expedition, reads, "The sound is not inside the stone. It is inside us. The mountain only gives it back." Her team found no trace of her, only her lamp still warm. A few have felt faint, overcome with emotion or peace, unable to explain why. At dawn, when the light first touches the cliffs, a thin mist rises from the opening, curls upward like smoke, faint and translucent. Villagers call it the morning exhale. They collect the dew that forms on the rocks nearby, believing it carries the memory of the first breath of the world. Tests later showed the droplets contained fine traces of silica, nothing more than the air filtering through mineral veins. But when the wind passes again, and the hum returns, even the scientists fall silent. Perhaps truth is not in proof, but in presence. You step inside now. The air tastes of stone and rain. Perhaps it is the acoustics. Dust drifts through the narrow beams of light, forming lazy constellations that move when you breathe. You close your eyes. The hum begins low, almost shy, then deepens until your chest answers it. Every cell seems to open slightly, as if remembering what it was made from. The walls seem to pulse with slow life. The floor beneath you feels less solid, more like skin stretched over something immense. In that stillness, thought fades. There is only rhythm, inhale, exhale, pause. A communion between body and earth. And then, as softly as it began, the sound slips away. Perhaps it is memory. The air stills. The dust falls in slow spirals, settling like tired stars. The gate behind you sighs once, a final whisper of wind through stone. You step out into sunlight, blinking. The mountain stands silent again, its secret folded back into itself. You breathe deeply and find that the breath moves differently now. Slower, steadier, deeper. The sound lingers inside you, not in your ears but in your blood. Perhaps that is what the gate was built for. Not to summon voices, but to return us to the oldest one. The breath that shaped dust into life. Perhaps, in a world made of vibration, the temple simply allows you to hear what has always been there. The hum that still threads through the quiet of the world. The reminder that even stone remembers how to breathe. The desert stretches without mercy or memory. Grains of glass, endless and whispering, shifting under the light like slow rivers of fire. But beneath this sea of sand lies a city, or the ghost of one, sleeping just below reach. Its name has been lost to every tongue that once spoke it. The few travelers who have felt the strange stillness above it call it Mirith, the place of inheritance, though no inheritance remains but silence. From above, nothing betrays its presence. No ruin, no mound, only the faint unevenness in the dunes when the moon stands directly overhead. Yet satellite images taken decades ago, and later forbidden, reveal perfect geometry under the sand. No bones were found within its walls, no offerings, no traces of burial. Streets aligned to stars. Circles nested inside squares. The shape of thought itself preserved in stone and buried by time. They say this city was first built in dreams. A mystic centuries ago spoke of it before any spade touched the desert floor. He claimed that each night, as he fell into sleep, new structures rose before him. Towers of moonlight, bridges woven of dust, courtyards that smelled of salt and thunder. Every dawn, he drew what he had seen. For years, his journals filled with sketches too precise to be invention. He believed the city was not imagined, but remembered. This was never a tomb, a remnant of a world that had existed before waking was born. When he died, his followers carried his scrolls across the desert. They found the coordinates he had drawn by hand. There, they say, the sand felt different, cooler, heavier, as though layered over stone. The first excavation began quietly in the 1930s. A team of French archaeologists worked in secret for fear their find would be dismissed as myth. Within weeks, they uncovered fragments of marble walls, each etched with symbols of sleep. Closed eyes, crescent moons, spirals that seemed to turn even while still. But the most haunting discovery was the material itself. The stone glowed faintly under starlight, as if absorbing and reflecting the night. And yet the stillness feels funerary, as though something vast has been laid to rest here, not dead but dreaming. When they tested it, they found traces of quartz mixed with ash and mica, substances known to store vibration. The team's notes described a strange occurrence. Every dawn, the instruments left in the site would be covered in fine dust arranged in patterns, like ripples across a lake. When they brushed them away, the same shapes reappeared the next night. No wind was strong enough to explain it. By the second month, they uncovered a doorway sealed with glass so smooth it looked like water. The inscription above it read, "All who sleep shall return." And then, before the excavation could continue, a sandstorm buried the site entirely. 3 men were lost. Funding was cut. The city went back to sleep. The hum deepens as the night darkens. Half a century later, desert wanderers still spoke of hearing faint tones beneath their tents on windless nights, a hum so low it trembled through their ribs. Pilots flying overhead reported compasses spinning. One expedition returned with sand that seemed magnetized. Another brought back stones that emitted soft light for hours after sundown. Scientists called it piezoelectric discharge, pressure within the quartz releasing light. But the stories persisted. A city alive beneath the dunes, breathing. Stars appear through the open oculus, their light falling directly onto the central floor where a circular pattern is carved. Some say the city dreamed itself into being, that it was not built by hands but by longing. Each inhabitant once a thought, each structure a memory crystallized in sleep. When the world above grew too loud, they sank willingly beneath the sand to keep dreaming. And sometimes, when the desert is silent enough, their dreams rise again, shimmering, for seconds, on the horizon before dissolving. Others believe the city was real, an ancient center of astronomy and ritual, where dream and observation merged. Its architecture, aligned perfectly with the precession of stars, seems to confirm it. Archaeoastronomers studying nearby ruins note identical alignments in lost Sumerian and Indus sites. Always the same geometry. Circles within squares, paths aligned to Sirius, the star of return. Whatever it was, the feeling remains. It is not decorative. Even standing above it now, with only sand in sight, the air holds a weight, as though the city still exhales from below. Night falls and the wind dies. The desert becomes a mirror. Stars press close, reflected faintly in the sheen of the dunes. And then, for a moment, something changes. A pulse beneath the feet, the faintest tremor. Grains of sand shiver and rearrange themselves into pattern. Long curves, intersecting lines. Light seeps from beneath, blue and uncertain, tracing invisible streets. It is a map of resonance, concentric rings expanding outward like ripples from a single note. An outline of a city rises in silence, towers transparent as smoke, gates glowing with moonlight. It lasts only a breath, maybe 2. Then the wind moves again, and the dunes fold over it like water closing above a stone. But for those who see it, the image never leaves. A geometry of light that feels not remembered, but recognized. Archaeologists still debate the site's location. Some place it in the Rub al-Khali, others in the Sahara near Siwa. A few suggest it lies beneath what is now the dried lakebed of Turkana. Each claim overlaps with another city: Atlantis, Iram of the Pillars, Zerzura, myths of white cities swallowed by time. A legend from a nearby village tells of a woman who came here after losing her child. Yet none explain the consistency of the dream. Across cultures, across centuries, the same vision. A sleeping city that stirs beneath the sand when the sky aligns with certain stars. Psychologists call it archetype. Mystics call it memory. The desert calls it breathing. If you could descend through the layers of sand now, you might find streets still intact. Columns carved with the same spiral script that once lined the Temple of Sound. Doorways opening into rooms filled with fine dust shaped like water frozen mid-motion. And somewhere, perhaps, a hall lined with mirrored stone, built to reflect the stars below the surface, so that those who lived there could study the heavens while sleeping. She lay on the cold floor through the night, waiting for the sound. What would they have seen? What would they have heard in their dreams? Perhaps the same hum that threads through every story. The breath beneath the stone, the vibration in the mountain, the tone of the living earth itself. Each place a fragment of one vast architecture of listening. It is said that on rare nights, when storms pass and the sand lies smooth as glass, the desert remembers its shape. Wanderers waking before dawn have seen strange footprints leading nowhere. Others have dreamed of narrow streets lined with silver doors, their hinges sighing open as they approach. When they wake, the scent of rain lingers, though no rain has fallen for years. Some who have camped near the rumored site speak of voices rising with the wind. Not words, but tones, syllables without language. When it came, she said she felt his presence, not beside her but within the vibration itself. If you listen too long, they say, sleep comes quickly. And in that sleep, you walk among glowing arches, tracing walls that feel warm under your fingertips. You pass through a square filled with pale light, and when you look back, the footprints behind you fade before your eyes. You wake with sand clinging to your palms. The mystic who first dreamed the city wrote one final sentence before his death. When the world forgets how to listen, the dream will return. Perhaps this is what we now call déjà vu, the mind brushing against an older pattern, the faint memory of streets that never were but always are. Perhaps we are all fragments of that dreaming city, still building and erasing ourselves with every breath. The next morning she returned home and told her people, "The earth remembers, the desert keeps the secret well." But sometimes, when the stars settle low and the wind sleeps, you can almost hear the stone shifting beneath the sand. A sound like slow exhalation, like dust remembering its shape. And in that stillness, it is easy to believe that the city still dreams, and that one day, when the world grows quiet enough again, it will open its eyes and find us waiting. The mountain stands alone, far from roads or villages. Its flanks are scarred by fire and time, yet at the summit the stones remain smooth, dark glass fused by lightning long ago. Here, where the world thins and the wind holds its breath, an oracle once waited beneath the open sky. No roof, no walls, only the circle of black stone and the night above it. Then she disappeared into the dunes, never seen again. They called it the Chamber of Descent, the place where stars fell to speak. Every year, when the Perseids crossed the heavens, pilgrims climbed the mountain carrying small bowls of water from distant rivers. They poured the water over the stones and watched the sky reflected in it. Each falling star drew a bright line across the surface, vanishing into darkness, as if the heavens themselves were writing upon the earth. It is said that the oracle would sit silently through it all, eyes open, hands on her knees, her hair braided with silver threads. She never spoke during the storm. Only when the final meteor faded, just before dawn, would she lift her face and whisper a single word. Sometimes a name, sometimes a direction, sometimes nothing at all. There are other stories too, of scholars who dream of voices speaking in tones rather than words, of lights flickering within sealed chambers, of compasses spinning though there is no magnetite nearby. Her temple was unlike any other. There were no altars, no idols, no chants. The pilgrims brought no offerings. Their devotion was silence, their sacrifice, waiting. In the thin air of the mountain night, the fire of the meteors seemed close enough to touch. Fragments burned across the sky and were gone. The people called them the returning ones, believing each flame carried a soul that had fallen back to earth to whisper a forgotten truth before vanishing again. The oracle listened to those whispers, not with ears but with the body. Her breath followed the rhythm of the falling stars. Inhale with the blaze, exhale with the dark. Every explorer leaves with a fragment, not of knowledge but of quiet. She believed each descent was not destruction, but communion, light meeting matter, heaven reminding earth that they were once the same. Fragments of writing remain carved into nearby rock. They are not instructions, not prophecy, only reflections. To fall is to return. Light remembers its weight. Silence is the last language. Archaeologists who studied the site found traces of melted meteorite iron among the stones. The ancient builders had gathered these fallen pieces and placed them around the circle, forming a boundary between the human and the cosmic. Even now, under starlight, those fragments glimmer faintly, a metallic pulse breathing through the cold. Something in this place teaches you that silence is not emptiness. It is full of listening. One inscription, half buried, speaks of the oracle by name, Siley, meaning the one who listens for fire. No lineage, no tomb, only that. The first mention of her in recorded history appears in a scroll from the early Hellenistic period. A traveling historian described meeting a woman of smoke and silence, who lived above the clouds and spoke, as if the stars were using her tongue. He claimed her words predicted the burning of a nearby city, an event that occurred 3 years later when lightning struck its wooden walls. Others dismissed her as myth, but across centuries, travelers continued to find their way to the summit, guided by rumor and need. Some returned saying they had seen lights falling so close that the air itself turned silver. Some returned silent, unable or unwilling to speak. Outside, the desert night spreads vast and silver. There are scientific explanations, of course. Meteor showers occur when the Earth passes through trails of cosmic dust. The thin air at altitude makes them brighter, their trails longer. But none of that accounts for the sound that so many describe. A low hum that begins just before each streak of light, like breath drawn through hollow bone. For a century, researchers have debated the phenomenon. Cannot be thunder, the stars are too high. Nor is it mere imagination. Instruments have captured faint electromagnetic vibrations during the storms, audible through radio receivers. They call it electrophonic sound, the voice of falling stars. Wind passes softly over the dunes, and the stars burn steady and patient. The ancients simply called it prophecy. Imagine standing there now, as night unfolds over the mountain. The air is thin and dry, the stones still warm from the vanished sun. Far below, clouds drift like sleeping oceans. Above, the first stars arrive, slow, patient, blue-white. The oracle's circle still remains. Each stone smooth as water-worn bone, each one humming faintly with cold. You sit where she once sat. The The horizon dims until it disappears, and the sky becomes a black ocean trembling with anticipation. Inside, the hum continues, unbroken, unhurried. Then a single streak of light, and another, then dozens, hundreds, thin threads of fire falling through the dark. For a moment the mountain glows. The sound comes next. Not a crack, not a hiss, but a tone that seems to rise from the very air. It enters through the chest, through the bones. It vibrates in the teeth, in the spine. It is not outside you. It is you. Perhaps it is the movement of air through ancient vents. The heart slows. The breath deepens. The eyes fill with reflections too bright to hold. You are no longer watching the sky. You are inside its descent. The ancients believed that meteors were messengers from the edge of creation, sparks from the forge of the divine. Each one carried a single word from the beginning of time. But by the time it reached Earth, it had already burned away, leaving only an echo in those who witnessed it. That, they said, was revelation, not knowledge but recognition. Perhaps it is the echo of the planet turning beneath our feet, the sudden knowing that nothing is separate. The oracle's silence was not mystery. It was understanding. When dawn came, she would rise slowly, gather the cooled fragments of stone and scatter them into the wind. The people thought she was discarding the message. In truth, she was returning it. Modern visitors sometimes find small spheres of fused sand among the rocks. Tektites, formed when meteors strike with heat so intense the desert itself turns to glass. They hold them to the light and see their own faces distorted within. A reflection of fire remembering its fall. Or perhaps, as the old priests believed, it is the world speaking back to the stars. In the years since her last recorded appearance, the mountain has grown quieter. Only climbers and wanderers come now, drawn by rumor. Some spend the night hoping to see what she saw. Others stay only minutes, unnerved by the hush that falls when they cross into the circle. But every August, when the Perseids return, the same glow touches the summit. The same hum trembles through the stones. And those who happen to be there, scientists, shepherds, travelers, speak afterward with the same slow voice, as though their words have been tempered by distance. They describe feeling as if they had been addressed. Not by a god, not by a voice, but by gravity itself. The oldest language, the pull between sky and soil, light and matter, ascent and fall. You kneel at the center of the chamber. At the edge of morning, the stars fade. The sky turns pale, the fire extinguished. But in the silence left behind, something lingers. A warmth on the skin, a ringing in the chest, a thought too vast for language. The circle of stone holds that quiet as it has always done. It breathes once more, exhaling mist into the thin air. And perhaps, if you listen closely, you will hear what the oracle heard. Your candle trembles, the sound of the universe remembering itself as it falls through the dark. Not ending, not breaking, only returning, again and again. Like breath, the monastery sits above the clouds, carved into the spine of a forgotten mountain. When the valley is fog, it appears to float, its walls silvered by mist, its roofs trembling in the wind like the scales of some sleeping creature. There is no sound here except for the slow rhythm of bells turning with the fog, and the faint scratch of a quill that never seems to stop. Inside, among the scent of wax and rain-soaked parchment, works a single man. He is known only as the archivist. The vibration rises through the floor, through your spine, into your breath. Every night, as the moon climbs the slope of sky, he sits beneath a small circular window and writes by its light. His table is narrow, crowded with scrolls whose ends curl like withered petals. He copies without pause, line after line, from texts so old their ink has faded to silver. Some are written in languages no longer spoken, others in codes of geometry and color, circles within circles. He speaks each word softly as he writes it, as though the air itself must learn the shape before it settles on the page. The candles around him burn low and steady, yet he does not touch them. The moon is enough. No one knows who he was before he came here. It is not sound anymore but presence, a communion that has no name. The monastery's records begin with his arrival, a wanderer who carried no possessions but a single book bound in black cloth. He arrived at dusk, eyes lowered, asking only for a place to write. When the monks opened his book, they found its pages blank. They gave him a desk by the window, thinking him another seeker. He has not left it since. Generations have passed. The monastery changed, burned, rebuilt, emptied, filled again. But always someone claims to see his lamp burning in the upper room. Scholars who later examined the manuscripts attributed to him found something strange. The walls seemed to pulse with faint light. Each copy was perfect, too perfect. Even when he transcribed damaged texts, the missing words reappeared as though recalled from memory. The ink shimmered faintly under moonlight. When held to the ear, the parchment gave off a soft tone, a vibration almost like a whisper. Some pages were found written in two scripts at once, one fading as the other appeared. One scholar called it the language of reflection, as if the page were writing itself backward in response. There are stories among the monks of that house. They say that on certain nights, when the clouds part and the moonlight fills the room, the archivist's shadow detaches from him. It moves across the walls, tracing letters in dust, arranging the air into symbols that vanish with the dawn. The carvings ripple. They speak of hearing faint murmurs behind closed doors, not in any human tongue but in the rhythm of turning pages. And when morning comes, new manuscripts lie upon his desk, works no one saw him write. Some monks believe he is not a man at all but a spirit of memory, an echo of the library itself. Others say he is the last survivor of an order that vowed never to die until every word of the world was copied into light. Among the texts found in that mountain archive, one bears his handwriting and a title translated as the Mirror Book. It begins as a normal chronicle, dates, names, fragments of forgotten empires. But halfway through, the script begins to curve, letters folding inward, forming spiral patterns. The words repeat themselves in shrinking circles until they merge into a single point. When magnified, that point reveals smaller writing, a world of letters inside letters. Every silence feels alive, an entire text contained within the dot of an eye. When researchers tried to photograph it, the image came out blank. A single line appears at the end, faint and uneven. When language forgets itself, it becomes light. The tools he used still rest upon his desk. A quill carved from the feather of a black heron, a bowl of ink that never dries, a ruler made of bone, marked not with numbers but with stars. And beside them, the same blank book he carried when he first arrived. And then, just as suddenly, it fades. Each night he opens it and begins anew. Yet the pages remain untouched in the morning. Some believe he is not writing at all. He is listening. The quill moves, but the ink forms of its own accord. The words appear from somewhere unseen, flowing out of the silence between breaths. There is a record from a visiting monk who claimed to have spoken with him. He described the archivist's voice as soft, as if it were the echo of someone else's thought. He asked him what he was writing. The hum dissolves into stillness, leaving behind a hush so complete that your heartbeat sounds like thunder. The archivist smiled and said, "I am copying what the moon remembers." When the monk asked what that meant, he replied, "The moon sees what we forget." That monk left before dawn. He returned a year later with his hair turned white. Modern historians call the surviving fragments lunar manuscripts because of the peculiar sheen of their ink. Some have tested the material and found traces of silver, calcium, and dust similar to meteor residue. Others claim the pages respond to touch. Faint lines appear beneath the fingertips, glowing briefly before fading. No explanation satisfies anyone for long. The manuscripts remain half myth, half artifact. You close your eyes, like light trying to recall its source. Imagine standing in that room now. The walls are lined with shelves heavy with scrolls, each breathing faintly as if alive. Dust drifts through the moonbeam like slow snow. The archivist bends over his page, his face calm, his eyes reflecting the pale glow. You can hear the sound of quill on parchment, steady and rhythmic, the heartbeat of memory itself. He pauses once, looks up, and for a moment his eyes catch yours. They are not ancient, not young, only patient. In their depths you see reflections not of yourself, but of everything ever written. He lowers his gaze again, and the scratching resumes. The sand shifts gently outside. Outside, the monastery bells mark the hour. Their tones roll through the valley and dissolve into the fog below. For a breath, it feels as though the whole mountain is turning pages. When the wind slips through the window, it touches the papers on the desk. They lift slightly, fluttering as if stirred by invisible fingers. One sheet slides toward the edge and falls. You pick it up. There is nothing on it. Only the faint shimmer of light where ink might have been. But when you tilt it toward the moon, shapes begin to form, letters of smoke, dissolving as they appear. Somewhere a star falls. You look up, but the archivist is gone. Only the quill moves, guided by no visible hand. The room brightens, not with flame but with reflection. Every page glows faintly, the shelves turning to silver. The light grows softer, then folds inward, like breath returning to its source. At dawn the room is empty. The book lies open on the desk, its first page written with a single sentence. Remember the silence between words. It is the oldest story. The ink is still wet. Outside, the fog rises. And in that quiet, you understand what the temple was built for. Not to call upon gods, but to remember what it means to listen. The mountain exhales, and the monastery returns to its stillness. But some nights, when the moon is high and the air is clear, travelers in the valley below see a thin beam of silver light coming from the upper window. They say it flickers like a candle held in the hand of someone reading. They say the archivist is still there, writing the world back into being. They say that if you listen closely, you can hear pages turning in the clouds. And maybe that is all history ever is. Not memory, not record, but light made patient. A whisper on parchment that waits for the night to arrive again. So it can remember itself by the moon. Not upward, but inward. The story begins with a silence so wide it seems to hum. A plain of pale dust under an endless roof of stars. No sound but the slow drift of wind and the heartbeat of your own pulse in your ears. Somewhere beneath this quiet, a river once flowed, though there is no water now, no glint or scent of it. Only a hollow in the earth that curves and loops like the memory of movement. Locals call it Al-Nar al-Sama, the river beneath the sky. Its bed runs for hundreds of miles through the desert, smooth as a vein, marked by stones etched with symbols that resemble constellations. When night falls, the stones glimmer faintly, not like crystal, not like fire, more like breath held too long and released all at once, toward the stars that still whisper beneath the stone. Centuries ago, caravans crossed this land following the stars. They traveled by night to escape the heat, guided by the bright path of the Milky Way above. Ancient astronomers named it the Heavenly River. They believed the one above and the one below were twins, reflections of each other, bound by invisible gravity. Greek texts called it Oceanus, the celestial stream that circled the world. In Persia it was Varukasha, where all waters begin. And in the desert here, the Bedouin told their children that when a soul leaves the body, it walks along the dry bed of Al-Nar until it meets its reflection in the sky and disappears. Explorers of the early 20th century came searching for evidence of an ancient waterway. Satellite imaging later confirmed what legend had preserved. A vast subterranean channel, now sealed by time, running directly beneath the visible dry bed. Some of the stones that line its surface are covered in inscriptions in Nabatean script mixed with symbols unknown to any known culture. Night gathers softly over the dunes, folding the horizon into ink and silence. They describe the river as the path between breaths, and warn that it flows only when silence is deep enough to carry it. The air above that ground holds a peculiar stillness. Compasses spin, electronic instruments fail, and when night comes, the horizon takes on a faint blue glow, as though light were rising from below the sand rather than falling from the stars. There are stories of those who have followed the dry bed under full moons. Travelers who claim that in the hour before dawn, the air grows heavy, and the ground begins to shimmer. Sand softens. A faint mist appears, curling upward like steam, and for moments too brief to measure, water seems to move across the desert, clear, soundless, gleaming with reflected stars. In a forgotten library at the edge of the desert, its roof half collapsed, its shelves warped by centuries of wind, a single candle burns beside a golden map. No one who has seen it can say what it is. Some call it illusion, others mirage. But even scientists studying the region admit that the soil holds an unusual capacity for reflecting light. They describe the phenomenon as ground luminescence, caused by charged quartz particles releasing energy stored during the day. Yet those who have stood there barefoot feel it differently. They say the light has weight like a breath returning to the body. Farther along the ancient bed stands a ring of stones weathered into shapes of sleeping faces. Archaeologists found traces of pigment on their surfaces, blue mixed with white ash, as if the builders had tried to imitate starlight. In the center of the ring lies a stone basin blackened by fire. No remains of offerings, no altars. The wax has melted into pools that shine like small suns, the flame trembling against the old parchment as though afraid to disturb the lines drawn there. Only the pattern of scorched sand arranged in spirals. It suggests a ritual not of sacrifice but of remembrance. Perhaps the people who lived here gathered to call the river back, not as water but as memory. A ceremony of light and silence. Their chants, if they chanted at all, would have been soft as wind through reeds. In one surviving manuscript from a nearby monastery, a traveler describes standing on the riverbed during an eclipse. The air was cold, he writes, and the stars shone even in daytime. The sand began to glow as if remembering its mirror in the heavens. I heard no sound but felt a vibration in my chest, as though the ground itself had begun to breathe. When I looked down, I saw my shadow reflected beneath my feet. The map itself is unlike any other. It bears no rivers, no mountains, no seas. Not above me, beneath. It looked back and smiled. No one knows what became of him after that entry. It is easy to see why this place inspired myth. All rivers begin as sky, vapor, cloud, condensation, and return there again. Perhaps the ancients, watching the stars move like flowing water, understood this better than we do. Perhaps they saw the circulation of all things, the eternal loop between above and below, between visible and unseen. Some believe the dry bed of Alnar marks the path of a meteor that once skimmed the earth without striking. Others say it is a wound from creation itself, where heaven brushed too close to the ground and left a scar of light. Yet the rhythm remains.